Hello, Steve White, Trek Boy 89 for Steve Arts 89. I just watched Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 4, No Win Scenario, and it was really brilliant. I was really surprised. I was sort of worried after the last episode with the changeling appearing that the series was going to descend into Deep Space Nine Season 8. And I'm not sure if it has yet, but this episode on its own was brilliant. It was a bottle episode. It stayed totally on the Titan and just dealt with that crew trying to survive. It was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. I was like talking back to the screen and yelling at the screen at one point, and I cried. It really absorbed me and got me, into it. Now, the episode starts off with Riker trying to stabilize the life support, basically, and he kind of has given up on escaping and is just trying to survive as long as possible, and basically tells Picard, get your affairs in order, talk to your son. So he asks to speak to him. Beverly sort of says it's okay. They go to the holodeck where they recreate 10 Forward, not the bar on the Enterprise, but the set they've already got built. And that's the side of earlier we see Picard go there for dinner, and he gets accosted by a bunch of cadets who want to hear about his adventures and everything. And he starts telling some stories, and he starts giving them a speech about how you're only as good as your crew, and it's all about working together. And if you really believe in your crew and your you can basically achieve anything. And that was sort of the gist of the speech. And we see Jack and him trying to talk, and at some point he does actually ask Jack why he didn't want to see him. He doesn't really answer. They sort of tell stories, and then Shaw comes in and he gives a monologue about his experience at Wharf 359, and he tells this horror story about how he was a low down engineer, grease monkey, and the ship was down to 10 life pods and 50 people, and some random lieutenant just started picking people to get in the the life pods and survive. And he was one of the 10, and he has some severe survivor's guilt. And he clearly hasn't tried to get any help for this in the last 20 years. He just decided to just be an a-hole and take it out on everyone else for the rest of his life and just wallow in this. And he gives this speech, and he basically says to Jack, ask your father where he was during all this. And he says, he was leading this. He was the main Borg, the worst Borg that has ever existed, so bad they gave him a name, and he makes him into a boogeyman and a monster. And Jack says enough, and Picard's like, no, it's okay, and he leaves. And Shaw's like, he says sorry to everyone, like basically at some point being an a-hole took place of charm or whatever. So he's just wallowing in it. I have no respect for the character. He could have gotten help, people with post-traumatic stress and war issues and stuff like that from, they can get help. We can help people today, so he could have gotten help then. He just decided to just wallow in it and just be that person. So I just don't have any respect for that character. I'd heard that he starts off as an a-hole, but you learn, what his deal is, and he sort of redeems himself, and I'm like, well, he hasn't done it yet. This was not the redemption scene for me with the story. But Seven tells Riker and Shaw that there actually is a changeling on board. Riker tells her not to tell anyone and to find it. Shaw tells her about the pot that would need to sleep in, basically, and if she can find that, they can get DNA from the residue, and they can find him through the scanners. So she's on her way to do that. She finds the pot. She's going down to somewhere to get it scanned, and she encounters the changeling. There's a firefight. A crew member dies, and she injures the changeling, but it basically turns into its liquid form and goes into a wall. Now, why she doesn't disintegrate it in this time, because it takes a few seconds to go in, I don't know. But eventually, Beverly comes up with a plan, because she's a smart little cookie. She's been observing these biopulses. When I first heard about the biopulses, I thought, okay, is this a life form? Is it going to change? Is something going to happen? And someone mentioned birth in one of the reviews from one of the people who've seen the whole series. And I thought, okay. She works out that basically these bioenergy pulses, whatever, are contractions. And this nebula is drawing in matter and putting out energy, and it's basically giving birth, and these are contractions. So she says we can time them. We should be able to ride one of them out. And they also come up with the idea that if they open up their cells, they can absorb the power from this pulse and recharge the ship to survive. So they take that plan to Riker, and he basically says no, and he sort of walks out. And Picard gives him the end of that speech about, we're only as good as the rest of our crew, and we're together and we're a family, and basically we can do this, and we have to go out trying, at least. That's Starfleet. So he turns around, it's like he finds his Riker again, and he's like, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this. And so they send Seven and Shaw up to fix the cells and open them up, because none of the current engineers are old enough to know how to, hotwire this sort of old ship. So he goes up there, and that's the point where they're confronted by the changeling again. It's obvious it's the changeling because it appears in the form of Ensign LaForge, and Seven right away has a gun at her and tests her and asks her what her name is, and she says Commander Hanson, and she shoots her dead. And he's like, how did you know? She said, well, she always calls me Commander Seven out of respect. So they kill the changeling, they open up the nacelles, and they're waiting. They cut off life support, and they're waiting to ride the wave out. Now, in the meantime, earlier on, we see the Shrike, and we see that she's a changeling. Basically, she cuts off her hand, and it turns into a face and starts talking to her and giving her orders, and tells her she has to go into the nebula and pursue the ship, even though it's a no-win, no return sort of, she's not coming back, but he says she has to do it, so she accepts it, she goes in. Now, the crew is waiting for this pulse, finally comes, and it lifts the ship. They manage to ride the wave. At some point, Riker gives Picard command, and because he has done this before, basically, and he's basically giving directions, and they're basically flying the ship around the asteroids and out, and it's an amazing sequence. We have some nice shots of the ship in the episode, and this was a great sequence with it riding, and we see it's absorbing the energy, and it's fueling the ship. The lights come on, everyone's relieved, and then when they get out, just as they're about to get out, the Shrike appears, and Riker grabs an asteroid with the tractor beam and throws it right back at the Shrek, just like they threw the ship at them early in the episode, and also like a scenario in the unproduced, unfinished Axanar story, apparently. And they knock her out, and that was the point where I was like yelling at the screen, like, yeah, take that, F you. And they get out, and just as they get out, the nebula changes, and suddenly it turns into a whole sea of little glowing space babies, much like the jellyfish in Encounter to Farpoint, except they have like an oval head with eyes instead of just a round head like a literal jellyfish. And they're all in awe, and they're all relieved, and they got through this together. They made a miracle, and Dr. Crusher says, to seek out new civilizations and new species, and Riker says, okay, time we boldly get out of here. So they warp out, and there's a bit more sort of speech giving, and Riker calls up Troy, because he had to leave because she couldn't handle feeling that he was dead inside and had no hope, and he had to go back out and find himself and find hope again. And he's like, I've found it, and they have a moment, and it looks like they're reconciling. And then we have, I think the last scene is Jack in his crew cabin, and he's looking in the mirror, and he starts having flashes of the red sort of vines behind him, and the red nebula and the door, and it sounds like someone's saying, "Find me," and that's the end of the episode. Now, I thought this episode was brilliant. Like I said, it was like a bottle show. It was all about the crew surviving, and just about the crew as a family and a unit and working together, and basically what they could achieve together. And it was really brilliant. It really felt like Star Trek. This is the first episode of anything that's felt like Star Trek, since the beginning of all this, the New Trek era. And, Discovery's ending. This is the last season of Picard. We're just going to be left with, the animated shows are going to go on for a bit, but we're just going to be left with, I think, Strange New Worlds. And I'm not sure if that show is ever going to live up to Star Trek. So this may be the last great episode of Star Trek we get, but I've heard this is Act 1, and the next 4 episodes are Act 2, and they're just as good, and the final 2 episodes are like a movie, Act 3 like a movie, and it is brilliant. They had said this episode was great. They were right. I'm starting to have some faith in them. I do have some faith in the rest of the series. I'd like to think they can redeem the Star Trek universe that New Trek has sort of tossed aside, and I have some hope. But I really enjoyed it. It was really great. It's the best episode of Star Trek I've seen in years, on par with episodes of Enterprise and Next Gen and Voyager and Deep Space Nine. And I'm really looking forward to the next few episodes. I do have some faith that this whole series is going to pan out, and it's going to be probably the last great sort of Star Trek that we have.